I'm Dr. William Hall, and I have practiced cosmetic surgery here in Scottsdale, Arizona for approximately 23 years.
I'm Dr. William Shuell, and I've practiced OBGYN for 25 years and then overlapped with cosmetic surgery for 23 years.
One of the most probably important questions that I get asked when people come in to me for a consultation for liposuction, or when they call on the phone or they have questions is, doctor, do I need a tummy tuck or do I need lipo? And isn't that one of the very common questions you get asked as well?
It comes up constantly.
Yeah, and they get a lot of different answers from different, depending on the doctor that they go to. So, the important thing to know is that a tummy tuck cannot do what a lipo can do, and a lipo cannot do what a tummy tuck can do. They're two mutually exclusive procedures. Tummy tuck is simply cutting the skin, and a doctor, at least in the United States, it's frowned upon for a doctor to do heavy liposuction at the same time of that abdomen, because the blood vessels that have to feed that healing tummy tuck scar arise from above and go downward. So if a doctor does the tummy tuck and lipos the belly, you can get dehiscence of the scar. The scar won't heal properly, it'll widen, it'll be a poorly looking tummy tuck. So a lot of women get confused. They rush out and they do a tummy tuck because that's what their doctor told them. But then they're right back in our office a year or two later going, well, I thought this would have taken care of all the fat up here.
Absolutely.
So, it's just frustrating for a lot of people.
Many women will say, I had a tummy tuck and I look in the mirror and I'm still square. I thought I was going to get curves back. And what happens is the plastic surgeon is applying the power of the tummy tuck, which is between the belly button and the pubic bone. That's where its power is. If that surgeon fails to properly liposuction the sides, the back, and the upper abdomen, he's going to get kind of this upside down woman phenomenon, and we have to correct it with liposuction.
Yeah.
So people need to move in the proper order.
Yeah, and the proper order is you always do the lipo first and clean out everything, because if you let someone pull you tight with a tummy tuck without removing the fat, then when you need the fat removed, we're going to loosen the tummy tuck up. Yep. So there's an order in which you do things if you want it to be done properly, and even though we can save things and do lipo after a tummy tuck, it's not the optimal order of things.
Correct.
So in our world of body sculpting, there's kind of two schools of thought. There's more traditional lipo that's been done the same way for 40 years using large caliber instruments. The patient is totally knocked out and unconscious, asleep. And you can do lipo that way, but it really hasn't evolved that much over the past 30-year period. It's kind of the same procedure, and it's, in our opinion, it definitely a little bit more barbaric of a procedure, more difficult recovery, much more trauma to the soft tissue when a doctor has you asleep and uses large caliber instruments. Causes much more bruising and swelling of the tissue, which then when the patient wakes up from their anesthesia, they're tremendously sore. So in the world of liposuction, anybody that really specializes or focuses on body sculpting all day, every day, like we do, is going to use more modern methods of liposuction, what we call liposculpture. So more accurate, more patient-friendly methods that give more reproducible results. So our liposuction here, which we call the Infini liposuction procedure, is we do things entirely under local anesthesia. We don't knock our patients out. That allows us to have a living canvas to work on. Someone who has muscle tone, which is so important when you're doing body sculpting. So if I'm doing the edge of an abdomen and I say, oh, Dad, I don't know if I removed enough fat. Mrs. Jones, can you please lift your leg up or tighten your abdomen? Oh, I missed it. I got a little bit more there. Those are the luxuries that we did not have when we did this at the beginning of our careers under general anesthesia and when patients were sedated. The second thing that we do is we do a detailed form of lipo. We use really small instruments in multiple little tiny ports or incisions so that we can crisscross and crosshatch from different angles to give the smoothest result possible in lipo. And that's always been the kind of horror story of more traditional lipo, was that, oh, the doctor left me with all these irregularities, or it was really wavy. So the only way to combat that is to use more modern methods of lipo that give you more reproducibility if you're pumping out a lot of cases of lipo.
Absolutely. We have about 250 instruments here, but we use the latest ones now because the science is always evolving. And so now we use instruments 5 years ago. Compared to 5 years ago, these instruments are smaller, they're lighter, they do better work, and they leave smoother results.
And the recovery of lipo has changed dramatically when you use local anesthesia and you use much smaller instruments to remove the fat. It becomes a much more patient-friendly procedure. We do our cases, and the average patient is up on their feet the very next day. They're walking 1 to 2 miles the next day. Most patients can drive a car within 24 to 48 hours after the procedure. So you're not laying around in bed recovering for a week and can't get out of bed or do anything or take care of yourself or take care of your family or your kids. It's just the opposite. This is a much more patient-friendly, quick way to bounce back after lipo.
And we're not saying that it's pain-free. There will be muscle soreness the next day. I say muscle soreness because that's how the body feels, as if you worked out a certain set of muscles like your abs just too hard and 2 days later they were sore. But just like muscle soreness, if you move that body, if you power through your recovery, you feel better than if you're lying around in a bed. I think there's no permanent effect. They're not harming their final result, provided they're wearing their garment and observing themselves and making sure that it's the appropriate garment for the time in their recovery. Because garmenting can sometimes cause indents when the patient's inattentive and doesn't bring to our attention an area that might be tender or uncomfortable. We like to follow up with patients very closely. We want prevention rather than cure. To that end, both of us here provide patients our personal cell phone numbers so that they can contact us with any question or concern. I think increasing pain beyond the first few days of soreness, if you go through a period of soreness and then inexplicably you have an increase in your pain, an increase in swelling, then a simple call to us or to the office can easily solve their problem. There's a saying that liposuction loosens and tummy tucks tighten, and that's true. And when we do liposuction on patients who absolutely do not want to have a tummy tuck, it's nice now that we have an option that we can actually do some tightening of the skin to neutralize the loosening effect of the liposuction procedure. And that is called J-plasma, and we're very pleased to have it available probably for the last 3 to 4 years. And we're getting some very nice results.
Yeah, it's definitely a game changer in our industry, isn't it? Because the problem with the liposuction industry and the body contouring industry is there's a lot of promises from technologies that come out, but the overwhelming amount of them underdeliver. That people want so bad to believe that something works for cellulite, for skin tightening. They want to believe that freezing fat is going to take care of their problem, doing cool sculpting or something like that instead of doing lipo. But the realm of skin tightening has been an area that has always underdelivered in our field with technologies. Finally, we have something though that does work, and it is a game changer for liposuction. I would estimate, and I've done probably well over 1,000 cases with Renuvion or J-plasma on different areas of the body, and I would estimate that it probably gives me 25% more tightening and pulling down than just my liposuction alone would give.
Yes, and the golden quest of cosmetic surgery, I boiled it down to tightening the skin of a woman without leaving a scar. So when we do liposuction, let's say on an abdomen, waist, and hips, and we can follow up with J-plasma and help tighten that skin down, we've partially achieved that desire to tighten the skin down through very tiny openings we make with liposuction, as opposed to the very formidable tummy tuck scar.
So some of the predecessors that claim to give you tighter or better skin, Smart Lipo, which was laser assisted lipo, Vaser lipo, which is simply ultrasonic assisted liposuction. They're great, and they have their uses for certain things, but they cannot do what Renuvion or J-plasma can do in the realm of skin contraction and pulling the skin down.
Correct.
Another common thing that people ask a lot is, am I a good candidate for J-plasma? Is it going to work for me? Is my skin? Well, that's a great question, because the issue with J-plasma is almost everybody is a good candidate for J-plasma if they're a candidate for the liposuction, for fat removal. If they have extra fat, we can address the skin afterwards. But the problem patient, or the problem patient that maybe won't respond to J-plasma, won't give them what they want, is somebody who doesn't have a lot of a fat layer but just has loose skin. So it's more of a skin issue without a fat layer in there with it. That's a difficult challenge for J-plasma, where it wouldn't shine, so to speak. But liposuction followed by J-plasma, almost everybody is a candidate for that procedure.
Yes, and we don't know the degree of improvement they'll get. Nobody does, because as with all things biological, our results are based on a bell curve, which essentially means that 5% of people might not have much result. 5% of people on the other end will be poster children for the technique. It's so good. And the rest of us, the rest of humanity, we get varying degrees of improvement based on what was done with liposuction, their age, and their natural genetic elasticity. Avéli is a new technique that we've been happy to bring here, which finally gives us what we hope to be a long-lasting, point-specific treatment for cellulite. This is not the tiny 1,000-point cellulite of a thigh or a buttock, but the more defined thumbprint type cellulitic dings or dimples that appear principally in a woman's buttocks and outer thighs. We finally have a technique that can go in under local anesthesia using the same anesthetic that we might use during a liposuction procedure, and follow up by directly targeting and easily removing the tethers, the fibrous tethers that deform the skin and pull it down toward the muscle. Because in point, cellulite isn't really about fat, it's about how skin connects to muscle, and that's what we're addressing directly. It severs you go in with an instrument and you hook the air, you find the dimple, if you will. You put a little instrument in its disarmed position, and all it is like a light skin hook with no cutting ability. And you pull where you believe that the tether is. And you can literally see the skin right where you marked it dropping or depressing. And so then you arm the device by pressing another button, and it opens up a tiny little cutting blade, and you actually pull back and you can sever that, and you get the gratification, the instant recognition that you've made the improvement, because the skin cooperates by popping back up. It's a pretty cool technique.
But it's basically a blade. You're basically cutting those soft tissue tethers that are pulling the skin down.
And you can't just go in willy-nilly. Let's say take a big blade, and just sever all the connections under the skin. If you float the skin like that, you cause bleeding, you devascularize the skin, you can wind up sloughing the entire skin, or floating it where it doesn't sit naturally on the fat and muscle that remains, and you'd have a very poor cosmetic result on your hands. So you have to go in, we call it discontinuous dissection, where you go in, even in a cluster, sometimes we have a dozen tightly clustered areas. You might pick 7 or 8 of those, and you wouldn't do the others that time because you can't afford to float the entire tissue.
Avéli was launched in the United States in the past year, so I think anybody who's a professional body sculptor, that's what they do. They spend most of their day doing that. Is probably going to have that particular technology in their office, because you need it. Because if people are employing you to change the curvature of their body, to change their shape, they inevitably are going to turn to that same surgeon to help them with depressions and dimples and little divots in the skin that they want released.